We like to call it the Supernatural Hour. And now, our hosts.
Hey, welcome to the Supernatural Hour podcast.
Hey, glad to be here.
I'm your host, Raven.
And I am your co-host, Chad. For the main topic, it's brought to you by Oteo Mexican Restaurant. They have fine dining. If you're watching this on the YouTube, we're going to have a picture of one of the dishes that they have up there. Raven was watching our YouTube video the other night and looked at that and goes, wow, that looks good.
I'm like, we need to go again.
So,
other than the avocados, but
yeah.
Avocados are disgusting. It's the most disgusting food on the planet. If you like avocados or never had one, please go eat one so that the avocado industry doesn't hate me. But I don't like avocados.
So, as our main topic is brought to you by Oteo Mexican Restaurant, here's Raven with our main topic.
So we don't know how to say our main topic. It's up for debate.
Should we spell it first?
Well, I don't even know how it's spelled.
A-P-P-O-R-T.
So some people say Apport, some people say Apport.
And as I've been looking through it, I've seen most with the Apport.
Now, when I first started looking for it, I started looking under the 1P spelling. Apparently, that means on the left side of a boat. So if you want to do your own research and look up more about this after you've listened to the podcast, put 2 P's in there, A-P-P-O-R-T.
And then you will find some relevant articles and YouTubes. But with the 1P...
There's nothing.
I'm going, what are we going to talk about this week? Because I couldn't find anything.
I pulled it up and I was like, oh, dang. I know what these are. I actually have a book that I read quite a while ago. It's really good that we're going to kind of refer to a little bit later. But it's called Demon Haunted, True Stories from the John Zappa's Vault. And it's, if you've read any of the John Zappa's books, he writes them with Rosemary Ellen Guiley. I can't pronounce anything tonight. Guiley. And Rosemary, if you are listening, I'm so sorry that I butchered your last name. But we'll reference this book a little bit while we're talking about it. If you've never read any of John Zappa's books, they are fascinating. They're easy reads. They're interesting reads. And I say that because I'm back in school and I've been reading a lot of textbooks that are dull and dry and hard to get through. John Zappa's books are wonderful to read. They're very entertaining and very informative as well.
So now we've talked about how to pronounce Apport.
That's it. Good night.
What is an Apport?
So I actually found quite a nice definition. So an apport is a transference of an object, known or unknown, it's something that's familiar to you or not, from one place to another. It's also something that disappears and later reappears in places recently searched, but not previously found in that place. Or it's an object completely unknown, appearing just out of the blue, often connected to someone who's deceased. So, if you're sitting in your bedroom and you look over and suddenly your deceased grandmother's ring is on your nightstand and you have no idea how it could have gotten there and no one in your house knows how it could have gotten there, it's an Apport.
Yeah, interesting stuff. There's a really interesting YouTube video, and I'll let you pronounce the name because you're working with the Muslim.
Amir Amidin.
Okay, Amir Amidin.
Amidin.
Anyway, that's Raven's.
Yeah. If you need to know how to pronounce stuff tonight, we are not your people.
The YouTube is, the Apports of Amir Abdomen, I can't even say it, with Stanley Kripliniger. And it's a very interesting, about a 30-minute one where they talk about this medium in the Philippines that could make things appear, that could make these Apports happen. And a lot of different things, and things would materialize almost on command. And there's been people that have said things like, are they faked? And we'll talk about some of the faked mediums that have been done before. But this guy studying this stuff, and he tends to think that they are real. And so that is done by the New Thinking Jeffrey Merlove podcast if you want to go out and look at that, or YouTube videos. It was really interesting. But things like polished stones, medallions, an emerald, and other coins appeared literally out of nowhere with him, and it was almost on demand, and things that were relevant to the people that he was dealing with, where he didn't really have the background on them. One of them that they talked about was a guy said something about, he needed to get a present for his 12-year-old girl, and and he hadn't talked with them before. He hadn't given any information about that, and a ring appeared that had 12 little gemstones in it. It was really quite fascinating, for the 12-year-old that fit her, they said.
So was he saying that, was he making things apport, or was he in contact with spirits and having
He was
them...
making in contact with spirits.
Okay.
It was not him doing this. This was his gift with the paranormal that made it happen. So it's really quite an interesting thing. And they talk about that there's some different museums that have objects that have been, apported. In fact, there's actually a term for it. They sometimes call them PPOs, which are permanent paranormal objects, because with the paranormal, oftentimes there's not a physical thing there. A lot of times it's energy. A lot of times it's an orb on a camera or something like that as evidence. But with Apports, these are real things, and whether they're things that have been moved from point A to point B in your house, or things that just materialized, it's like, where did that come from? And it wouldn't even necessarily have to be from a medium or something else. It can just appear.
Right. And there's things kind of are all over the place with this. And what I mean by that is I found an article that talked about, if it's neatly stacked, it can be gifts. And I thought, well, that's cool, like a gift from an angel, neatly stacked. And then it said, but it can also be connected to poltergeist or negative activity. So if things are stacked up in your house that have apported, we don't know.
Okay. Now, you've brought this up and talked to me about it before, about like when people find pennies and what the meaning behind that is.
Right. So like if you find a penny or a feather, butterflies, those are probably the three more common ones. Those are angels speaking to you. And that's, the thing, the specific thing. But when I read this about things being stacked, when I first read it, the reason that kind of made me go, is as far as being gifts from angels. The first time I heard the first time I heard of anything being stacked was at Cleve's house. And if you've been listening to us for years and years back, you'll know who Cleve is. He's a client of ours. We went and did several investigations at his house. His house was highly active.
Very dark. When we talk about
very, very dark.
Dark, his was one of those very, very dark investigations.
Right. And we actually, if you go back, we have a podcast where we have Cleve on, and he talks about everything that goes on in his house and crazy. But one of the things that happened to him, or a couple of the things that happened to him, his keys would disappear from one place and appear somewhere else. And he lived alone. Keep that in mind. He was in the shower one day, and he came out, and all of his couch cushions were stacked up in a pile. And, so that would be considered an apport. Apport? I like apport.
Apport.
I don't know why.
Apport.
Tomato. Anyway, I'll probably say it both ways. Sorry, forgive me.
Yeah, for most of these where things just appear, not disappear, but just appear, oftentimes they're small objects, jewelry, small rocks, pebbles, coins, medallions. We're not, teleporting or apporting cars and motorcycles generally.
Right. And it's not something that just appears out of nowhere all the time. Sometimes it can be, like the ring.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's just something appearing
that should have been in another place.
It should have been in another place, and you have no way to explain how it got there. It wasn't, I was gone for 5 hours and maybe grandma moved it. There's no explanation. So I found a fun story. And there was a woman, she lived in LA. I would credit her name, but it was on one of those weird answering things. Where you post a question and people posted answers. So I would credit her name, but she didn't really have it there. But she had this old hinge, like 2 hinges. And these hinges were special hinges. They weren't just like any hinge that you'd screw into wood. They were special hinges that were designed to screw into glass. And she didn't want to lose them, and so she had them in a vase. And the vase was, it doesn't say exactly where, but she said it was in a place where visitors couldn't just randomly go, oh, what's this? So I'm assuming it was probably tucked away in her bedroom or her personal bathroom or something. And she kept these in this vase because in order to replace these hinges, it would have been extremely difficult because the things they hooked to were antique, and it's not something you could just pop down to Home Depot and get a new one. And so she had them there to keep safe. Well, fast forward a few months, and she wants to use them. He didn't say why she didn't use them for months, but that's not relevant to the story. And she went to go get it. She got the vase. Well, one of the hinges and the 2 screws that went with it were gone. And I can't remember if it was a boyfriend or husband, but her significant other had passed away a while back. And, she's looking for these hinges. She can't find them anywhere. She's thinking, who would have moved them? She lived alone. And like I said, where she had this vase, she said that it's not someplace that visitors would get to, something that only she knew about. And so she's trying to figure out how she's going to make this work with one hinge. And, she's, doing all these brain gymnastics because she doesn't want to get rid of this antique that these hinges go on. And she says as she was kind of mulling this over and, feeling sad and frustrated because she didn't know where it went, she said, I very distinctly heard my boyfriend's voice say, Bobby, over here. And, she turned in the direction of the voice. And she had mentioned before that she had had contact with him a couple times since he had passed. So to hear his voice didn't freak her out because she'd heard it a couple times before. But she turned, in the direction of the voice. And on her bed, her neatly made bed, were these hinges and 2 screws just sitting there. And she said, not only do I live alone, not only had I not really had anybody over for a few days, she said, I just washed my sheets that morning and made my bed. And this was evening by the time she was looking for them. But she's like, I've sat on my bed to read. And she's like, if those had been there at any point during the day, I would have seen them. Mm-hmm. And anyway, so that is a story of an Apport.
Okay, so some other things about Apports, not airports, Apports, or Apports.
We don't know.
In England, there was some things called the skull experiments, kind of like the chewing tobacco skull.
I was going to say skull or skull.
I got skull like the chewing tobacco.
Okay.
Kinda.
Again, do not use us as a reference on how to pronounce or say anything. We suck at it today.
But these were some experiments that were produced or done, and I didn't get a date when they were done, but I think it was back in the early 1900s, maybe a little bit later, kind of when spiritualism was still pretty prevalent and, kind of a big deal in England and in the United States. And there were a lot of mediums that would be produce apports in their seances. They'd have seances and things would be produced, and things like jewelry would appear, family jewelry, different things. And it was really quite an interesting, phenomenon. But the skull experiments actually put them into a controlled area. And many of the mediums of the day, tried this, and they found things. They found different ways that these, the coins or jewelry or different things were appearing. And so they were able to debunk a lot of them, but there were a number of them that they couldn't debunk, that there were some mediums that this happened. And again, it's kind of one of those things that, kind of like with our ghost hunting, it doesn't always happen every time. Okay. When it is bad is when it does happen and you prove that it was done fallaciously or, with a string, or someone, tried to make a big incident and it's like, oh, that's obviously, faked evidence. But with these skull experiments, there were some of the mediums that they couldn't debunk. And again, these were in controlled areas. They were able to debunk a lot of them because it was a controlled area and they could be able to identify things and how they did this and that kind of stuff. And I thought that was kind of interesting. So, sometimes they came down on strings and different things and they were able to do it. But it's one of those things with anything paranormal, you've got to be in a mindset of, is this real? Is this really happening? Is there another explanation on that? How could you do that? And that's one of the things that we look at as we go into investigations. We're not going in to prove that something is there. We're going in the idea of trying to discredit it and understand why it's not, and see if there's reasons that it would be. Like with the orbs, is it just dust that's moving? Are there things that make sense of why it wouldn't be paranormal? We're not out looking, we like to prove the paranormal when we get evidence and we have things, but we don't want to fake evidence. We don't want to fake pictures and put fake pictures up or anything like that.
Yeah,
So,
if we go in someplace and we can't explain what's going on, then, please be paranormal and hopefully we'll get some sort of evidence. But if we go into someplace and there's nothing there, then there's nothing there.
and we're not going to make stuff up
Exactly.
to do that. And that's one of the things when we're on our public investigations, we tell people, we don't know what's going to happen tonight. There's nothing that we can make happen. This isn't a spook alley. We're not going to have things jump out at you that we know about. There very well may be paranormal activity, because I think there's paranormal activity in most places. One of the interesting things is I was watching another documentary on it, and they were talking about apports and teleportation, and the idea of some of the things that they're doing now with quantum mechanics and quantum particle theory, and they actually can do some minor teleportation things with calcium atoms where they can move them from one place to another. And there's some areas in the quantum mechanics where what do they call them? Entanglements in particles, where particles can be what they call entangled, and you can actually spin a particle in one place and the counterpart particle will spin in the other place, and they're different from each other. And it's how can you do something that's acting here that's reacting in a different location? And some of those kinds of things are some of the things that they're looking at that could have impacts into how apports and teleportation can work and how things can appear and disappear, because they're actually seeing that on a quantum level with a lot of the things that they're doing. And I thought that was quite interesting from a scientific standpoint.
Yeah, Chad used the word quantum and scientific, and my brain just checked right out. Poof.
Okay, Miss Unicorn Brain.
All right. Okay. So let me go into this book a little bit. Let me tell you the name of the title again. Unicorn Brain at Work right there. It's called Demon Haunted, True Stories from the John Zappa's Vault. It's really good. So basically he goes through, and each chapter is its own story of a case that he's worked on. And the demon box, foul things in containers. I'm just flipping through the burned altar. Very interesting stories. The thing in the stone egg. So, he's talking about things. And at the very end is this section. And he calls them a couple different things. John Zappa calls them walkabout objects. He actually has a couple of different things. Let's see. So he calls them, okay, so here's his definitions. I won't read you like any stories, but I will tell you a couple of the classifications that are used in this book. Walkabout, that is an article that disappears from a known location and is found later in another and often bizarre location without explanation for how it got there. And overall, you could call all of these jots or jottles. So all of these things would fall under
The category.
the category of jots or jottles. Oddly enough, he doesn't use the word apport.
Okay.
So I don't know. To me, apport and walkabout sound the same. There's a comeback. That's an article that disappears from a known location and later, sometimes minutes or perhaps even years, mysteriously reappears in the same location. So it says in here it could also be a special case of a walkabout. There's a flyaway, and a flyaway is an article that disappears from a known location and never reappears. A turnip. An article known to an observer, but from an unknown location, is found in a place where it was previously known to be. A windfall, which is a turnip in which an article is not known to the observer. And a trade-in is a flyaway followed by a windfall that is closely similar to the article flown away.
Interesting.
So, yeah, that's what he talks about. Anyway, so I was reading about walkabouts. Well, okay, let me start the story correctly. So Chad and I have this Bluetooth speaker. It's an older one, so it's kind of big as far as Bluetooth speakers go, but it was one of the first ones that came out, or at least an early one. I don't know, it's the first one. And my youngest daughter at the time... It's
what, about 6 by 3 by 2?
By 2?
Thick, maybe 1.5.
Oh, yeah. I thought you meant long. I thought,
no, 6 long.
Yeah, so it's not very big. And my youngest daughter at the time, this has been several years ago, but at the time she was about 3, and Chad had somehow made it so that she could listen to little stories on it. And she would walk around with this on her shoulder and look like she was from the 80s with her boombox on her shoulder. Okay, are you getting a visual image there? And she would listen to these little stories while she walked around the house. Well, one day it was gone. And so I'm thinking, okay, she's 3, right? It could be anywhere. And so I'm getting down on a 3-year-old level. I'm on my knees walking around the house trying to find where she put this. And, I'd clean rooms really good. I looked everywhere. I probably looked for this for 2 years.
Maybe more.
And this, again, this was years and years ago. And so could not find it. And I thought she probably threw it away,
Yeah, got put in a trash bag and garbage can, and we dumped it out without knowing what was in it. And,
yeah, things happen. And so I'd kind of written it off as, we'll never see it again. Well, fast forward several years, and Chad's daughter had gone on a mission, and we had some of her stuff stored in a basement room. And I'm jumping ahead in the story. We have a room in the basement that if bad water things are going to happen, they happen in that room. Anytime there's a leak in a pipe, and we've got some of that old gray pipe that they don't use anymore because it just springs leaks for the heck of it. So that room's not finished.
We had water in that room last week.
Oh, Lord. Anyway, so that's a whole other story that is not relevant to this podcast, so you'll have to ask me about it later or read my Facebook. Anyway, so we had a major, major water issue, and Chad and the plumber had spent in this room hours. Not only hours trying to diagnose the problem, but we had spent hours in there cleaning out water. We'd been back and forth in that room, I cannot tell you how many times over the course of a week. Okay, so go back to Don's daughter. So maybe a month after all these water problems, she came over to find some stuff in this room
that she'd had in storage with us.
And earlier that day, the day that she came over, I had read this book. And Chad had actually gone out with her to help her fix her car. And so I was home by myself. And I read this little thing about walkabouts. And I thought, because it made me think of this speaker, because the speaker just gone, poof.
And it was a big enough, nice enough item that it wasn't just something that you write off. It's like, that was like a $80, $100 speaker.
Yeah, it's like, that was a nice speaker. So I remember, and in the book it talks about, if you want to have something come back, you just demand it back. And this is when I was first really getting into paranormal. And so I thought, I'm going to give this a try. So I was sitting down, and for some reason, to me, it felt more formal if I stood up. So I stood up, and I'm alone in the house, but I still feel like an absolute idiot doing this, and just really loud. I'm like, okay, you know what? I was also missing a pair of scissors. Cutco really nice $100 scissors. So I stood up in the middle of the room feeling like an idiot, and I said, okay, and I don't know who I'm even talking to, right? I'm like, I had a Bluetooth speaker, little black Bluetooth speaker, and a really nice pair of white-handled scissors just disappear. Yeah, bring them back. I need them back. Okay, so just, I don't know where you've put them, but I need them to come back. Not 5 minutes later, Chad and his daughter come in, and they went downstairs to find her stuff. Probably 10 minutes after that, he came up and said, hey, look what I found. And he had the speaker in his hand. And I said, you are freaking kidding me. And he goes, and he's looking at me like, why are you so animated about this? And, I told him what I had done. I said, where did you find that? And he said, oh, right when you walk into that room, with all the water problems, it was just right there.
On the shelf.
Eye level.
But
no,
it was high.
Oh,
it was
high?
It was high. It was clear at the top. There's no way Molly could have put that on that top shelf.
Right. And we have been in that room for hours. And you would have seen it.
Yeah, because when I went in with Hannah, it was like, hey, there's the speaker.
Yeah, it's not like you were digging around and found it.
Yeah,
It was
we
just-
were looking for things, but we weren't looking on that shelf. We were looking, on other shelves. And so, it was like that was not...
Yeah, but it's not like we've never spent time in that room and never, yeah.
And when I say it was clearly within eye shot. It wasn't like it was tucked in behind something. It was clearly within eye shot, but it was high. It was nowhere that Molly could have put it up there.
Right. So that is my... The scissors never did appear. I think they just got thrown away.
Oh, they reappeared. They came when Cutco delivered your new
Well,
pair.
I had to order a new pair, but my original pair never reappeared.
We're hoping they show up. They're really nice scissors.
They cut pennies. Don't do that. That's defacing money, and the FBI will come get you. But if you wanted to, you could. Don't ask me how I know that. Okay. So that's Walkabouts. And if you want to read a really good book, it talks about walkabouts and it talks about some haunted items. So there's a little book review for you.
All right. Well, that was a great topic. That was very, very interesting and applicable to things that have happened directly to us.
The things.
So go out and check out our friends at the Town Hub Theater, or the Hub Town Theater,
The Hub Theater.
the Hub Theater.
It used to be called the Town Center, so we get it confused.
Okay. We've been around a long time. It's changed owners.
All right. Stay spooky, my haunty friends.
Hey, have a great night. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Supernatural Hour at AdvancedParanormal.com. The Supernatural Hour is part of the Radio Ronin network found at RadioRonin.com. Copyright by Advanced Paranormal Services.